we go to Stats SA because Stats SA tells us that reliance on government funding grew as the proportion of individuals receiving social grants increased from 12.8% in 2003 to 30.9% in 2019 and surged to 40.1% in 2024 due to the introduction of the special COVID-19 social relief of distress grant SRD, and all of this is contained in their household survey, general household survey. The percentage of households that received at least one grant increased from 30.8% in 2002 to 50.4% last year. The report reveals that in 2024, 42.4% of households were headed by females, with the highest prevalence in rural areas, 47.1%, particularly in the Eastern Cape, 48.8%, and KwaZulu-Natal, 46.8%. Female-headed households were least common in Gauteng, apparently 37.3%. More than one quarter, 26.9% of households consisted of a single person, while 39.4% were nuclear households comprising parents and children. Skip generation households, in which grandparents lived with grandchildren, comprised 4.2% of households. The latter were most common in the Eastern Cape, 7.7%, and Limpopo, 6.9%. Less than a third, that is 31.4% of children, lived with both parents, while 45.5% of children lived with only their mothers. More than one-tenth, that is 11.7%, were orphan. And almost one-fifth, 18.8% of children lived with neither of their biological parents. So these are some of the statistics that are actually coming out. Soli Molayi is the acting DDG for social and population and social statistics at Stats SA. Soli, nice talking to you again. How are you?
I'm good, Thabiso, and good afternoon to the listeners.
Yeah, these numbers, are they normal or abnormal, Soli, in the bigger scale of things?
Yes, I think, Thabiso, from our side, the statistician, the numbers, we just produce numbers. So whether they're normal or abnormal, I think from our end, what we are saying is that in terms of the social grant, we're seeing an increase. And I think you already shared with the listeners. And I think maybe just to bring context into this, that this is the survey that we are running on an annual basis. So we are able to see these numbers increasing or decreasing. For household, we are seeing that when you compare to 2003, we were sitting around almost 30.8%. Now we're sitting about 50.4%, meaning that half of the household in South Africa, they have at least one person who's benefiting from the social grant. If you look at it from the individual, we're seeing that the number of individuals have also increased, and largely in the ages between 15 to 24. And this is driven by the SRD, as you already mentioned, that we are seeing now a number of our young ones who are now receiving the SRD. And again, in the same survey, when we look at the issues around education, we see that we've got now a high proportion of those who are between 18 and above who are not in education or in training. And again, that's why we're seeing the number of social grants also increasing.
Yeah, also your survey shows that the percentage of households living in informal dwellings increased from 73.5% in 2002 to 84.1% in 2024. So there seems to be an increased number of people who live in informal dwellings, which is quite a good thing. And households owning the dwellings they live in are sitting at 60.1% and a further 25.1% in rented dwellings. So, it's this also is quite it's quite encouraging.
Yes, so if I may just come in, Thabiso. So if you look at that indicator, if you look at the formal household, as you said, they've increased over time, and this including your RDP houses also. And then when you get to the issues of tenure of status, which is whether you own it or you have paid it off, or whether you rented it. So we're seeing that provinces like your Mpumalanga, Eastern Cape, KZN, there's higher proportion of households who are saying they owned and fully paid off. And now look at your economic hub, your Gauteng and Western Cape. That's where now you start seeing the rental, that they have the large number of renters in those particular houses, in particular those particular provinces. And again, going back to that indicator about whether formal or informal, in terms of informal household, we are seeing that there's a lot of them in Gauteng and Western Cape, and also in Northwest. And this is largely because of our migration patterns. I mean, Northwest is largely driven by mining areas. And again, Gauteng and Western Cape, because of its economic hub, it's also attracting more coming from other provinces, and that's the reason why we're having a high informal sector, including also migrants that are coming from the SADC region who are also their preferred destination is Gauteng. We are also seeing, again, that's the reason why we're seeing a lot of informal settlement.
And the positive again, access to water and electricity, there's an improvement there.
Yes, definitely. But then if we follow on the discussion about informal settlement, if you look at Gauteng, we'll compare it to the national we're sitting around 90%, but in Gauteng we're sitting around 83.2%. The reason being is because of it's increasing by the number of households which is coming from informal settlement. So we're increasing the base of informal households in terms of the number. Therefore, your proportions won't always increase because you are increasing the base. It's similarly with the Northwest again. We're seeing the same. But in the other provinces, we're seeing a nice steady increase, especially for Eastern Cape and Free State. And this is also a positive. And the other point in terms of electricity is the main source of energy for cooking. Gas is also seeing a nice positive increase, with now sitting about 7.2% of the household who are saying we're using gas. Electricity is still the main source of cooking. The other nice thing that we're picking up from the slides, from the findings, is that the coal and paraffin is actually dropping, although it's still prominent in deep rural areas. But then we're seeing very few households are now relying on paraffin and coal to actually cook.
But something else also, coverage when it comes to medical aid is very low, particularly in provinces like Limpopo and KwaZulu-Natal in particular.
Yes, definitely. Access to medical aid is still low. And again, it has to do with, I think one has to look at it in terms of the salaries and wages in the household. We have seen over time there's dropped. We were sitting about 59% around 2009. Now we're sitting around almost 54%. And now we're starting to see that other indicators, like, for example, medical aid, are also starting to see a drop. And again, those provinces that you've mentioned, if you look at the main sources of income for those particular houses, mainly are driven by remittance and grants. That is not surprising when you look at the issue around medical aid.
Yeah, quite interesting indeed. So this information, Stats SA, you come up with this information. Where does it end up beyond just you just decoding what it means and where we are in the country when it comes to these dynamics? In other words, do your colleagues elsewhere in government, the big decision makers, take this information very seriously?
So from our side, Thabiso, what we do, because we're reporting to the Ministry of Presidency, we share with the Minister to say these are the key findings that are coming from the survey. But then what we also do, we have stakeholder engagement with different departments, because you can imagine that the survey like this, you've got so many departments that are actually linked to this: health, education, and COGTA also. So we are repackaging the findings to talk to those particular department, because it's important for us to share these numbers. And then the other thing that we are doing is that we also, because the data, we're releasing the data immediately with the report itself. The researchers who are in these different spaces, they are also able to do even further analysis in terms of the qualitative of because this is qualitative, so they're able to probe even further from the qualitative research. And I think that is also our contribution to make sure that South Africans are aware of some of the indicators, but at the same time, they are also able to also digest the information that can help them to make some decisions in the near future.
Does this information speak to the reasons? I'll tell you why. Because, I mean, part of it, which is something that we spoke about earlier when we started the show, the children who don't live with their mother and father. And there could be so many reasons. I mean, does this survey speak to, what the reasons would be over and above just stating that particular situation in the households?
Yes. So because the nature of the survey is the quantitative nature, we don't have the why part of it. And this is where now we're seeing our collaboration with the researchers who are in space, and they're able to probe further because we are able to quantify to say how many of the children who are living with their mothers or who are living with both parents or only with the fathers or neither, because there's also another option where we're looking at it, and especially in the rural provinces where we're seeing the children are living with the grandparents. And I think now that's when now the researchers are coming deeply, because then they will have to sit down with the grannies and try to understand further more information. And just to add on this point, Thabiso, even if you look at the other publication that we have released, that we are looking at the recorded live birth, meaning looking at the birth notification that Home Affairs is released. If you look at the section of the father, the information of that, 60% of those forms, we don't even have information about the father. So that can also give you an indication when you look at this indicator in terms of living arrangement within the household.
Got you. Thank you so much, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. There you go. Molayi, acting DDG for social and population at Stats SA.